Hello, my name is Dawn Sanchez, and this is Sex and Cinema. And we are annotating and taking a closer look at the movie Sunday Bloody Sunday, a John Schreiner film production. Well, John Schreiner was a part of an exciting generation of young English directors that emerged in the 1960s. He established himself with several successful films, and this gave him the opportunity to kind of break the rules, right? By making one of his most famous movies, which was Midnight Cowboy, which we took a look at in our class Sex and Cinema, which became a huge hit, right? After this triumph, Schreiner went on and he earned the right to do his own thing. And the next, he created a more personal film, a story he had been thinking about for years. And this film was released in 1971, and it was called Sunday, Bloody Sunday. The title, by the way, doesn't refer to the famous event in North Ireland that the band YouTube actually did a song about. And I actually looked up when I heard the title. I said, why does that sound familiar? Just because in history class, I remember reading about it and I said, why does that sound familiar? And I really thought that this movie was going to be about that. And I thought, but this is Sex and Cinema. And that movie, or that event, I should say, had nothing to do about sex and cinema. It was a really horrendous time in history that took place. And it was a lot of political things that drove that, and why YouTube later did a song about it, and it was more turned into actually a political thing, right? So this story, though, is infused with ironies and different tone styles of someone's observation of people with compassion, but he took it with an honest eye. And I love this whole storyline, because although this film was released in 1971, I can actually look at the film today and just kind of overlap what's going on. So we're in London, right? And it's this Jewish doctor, right? Then you have the divorced mother. And then we have this kind of a playboy, right? That loves both of them. So we have this love triangle going on. And at first, I didn't know how this was going to go. And let me just break down the doctor. The doctor, this London doctor, actually, let me do this. Jewish London doctor. And I have to put that in there, and you'll see why as we get more into it. He is a very just a prestige. Everybody knows him. Back then, in those days, doctors were psychologists, counselors, as well as medical physicians, where they can give you medicine for ailments. And I just thought he was just really like, he had this poise about him. He was really well kept. And when you first see it, and when you go into the movie, you start to look at this whole situation, and you thought, this man has it together and he's helping people. And so it gives you this whole vibe. They even shoot to his house, and how he's eating this like dated fruit, and he's listening to this operatic music. And so of course he is a man with status, and you'll see in this movie the different statuses that people play, whether they're rich, well off, middle class, starting over, poor, so on and so forth. You get what I'm saying, right? And I love how the way that John actually gets into that. So you kind of have the setting of where these people stand at in terms of economic status, right? So you get into the divorced mother. When she shot in this film, you can see her home. You can clearly tell it was kind of broken down. It was kind of run down, but it was nice. It was cozy. But when you see the dishes, and you can tell she's probably going through some depression there, although she is with this young lover, right? But it's not perfect by any means, right? And as I get into it, you will see why. So this whole love triangle is And let's not forget the young man that they're in love with, the divorced mother and the doctor. So here's a man that is nice looking, young, right, strapping, very educated, and he is trying to make it too. He has made some things and he is totally obsessed about America. And it gives me a little vibe that he wants to be an American where he is just happy, and where he feels like he's free, and he talks about American food, and actually in some of the clips you can hear the divorced mother talk about, and I'm gonna get the names here in a minute, the divorced mother, every time he mentions something about America, and she's always saying, "Oh, what is your obsession about America?" Kind of snobbing it down, whereas the doctor, which you can truly tell that he loves this man, right? He's like, kind of interested what he wants to do with his project that he's left at his home, because his home is big enough to kind of house his project. And he's talking to him about New York is interested and he wants to make a big thing. And so the doctor even says to him, well, has anybody done this before? And he said, I think not. So he's very much into this young man's promise in the future. And the way it ends, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, the way it ends is kind of an open-ended. I would like to have seen if this young man would have came back. And who did he come back to? Well, let's get more into the movie Sunday, Bloody Sunday, right here with yours truly, Dawn Sanchez. So I talked about the doctor, right? The divorced woman and the handsome prince. So let's get their names. So you have Peter Finch, yeah. Peter Finch as Dr. Daniel Herschel. You got the divorcee, Glenda Jackson as Alex. And you got Murphy Head, Bob Elkin. And I had to pronounce his name because in the movie, the doctor gets on the answering service, which is played by Betsy Love, how to say his name correctly. So once again, you can tell that this man loves this guy, right? So let's get into this love triangle. So we have this doctor, and you're talking about a Jewish gay man. So we're talking about in this movie about sex and a biracial relationship. Because here's the funny part: Alex, the divorcee, and the doctor know about each other, which is so funny because in today's world, we think, oh, people don't know about it, but of course they do. Everybody that is in a relationship, or if a woman is married or a guy is married, has had a hunch if they're fooling around or whatever like that. So I'm just going to assume that this town is very small, and that's why they know each other. But the funny thing about it is where they meet is at a friend's house when they're going away on the weekend. That blew my mind because you know what? There is a comedian called Kevin Hart, and he said something really funny. He said, if you're my best friend, I don't have to tell you to lie for me if I need you to lie. Basically, he said, my shit is your shit. And the funny thing is, in this movie, is truly that, because this family, which you can kind of say they're not, I won't even say that they're middle class. They're not middle class. But let me just tell you about this family. It's a husband and wife. And I'm trying to figure out where this Professor John comes in at, because he's the only man of color in this movie that says absolutely nothing. Now, the funny thing is, when I looked at it and I went back and watched it a second time, I said, yeah, she did say professor. And it was so funny because he was sitting at the table with a little girl. The little girl had a speaking part, but he didn't, but he was interacting with her. So I thought that was very funny when I was looking at this film, on the genius of how John made things loud and clear without saying a word, right? So even though he was a professor, he did not have a speaking part. And even when that family got ready to leave, and once again, their house looks very small. Alex, the divorcee mother, even talks about how cold the home is, right? You clearly tell that they are living fairly poorly, right? Even when they opened up the refrigerator, they just had open meat. I was shocked to see a Del Monte can not open inside the refrigerator. I was like, you can put those cans in the refrigerator? Really? You can? Okay then. So when I was looking at that whole thing, it set the stage on this family. And I'm not even quite sure where they were going to, but I know they were going out of town. The Professor Johns was coming with them. And here was the divorcee and the strapping prince. And they were there to look after their children, which, honey, these children were off the chain. These kids were smoking pot. That kid had to be no more than maybe age, I don't know, 5, maybe? Can a 5-year-old smoke a cigarette and look professional? And these children, it just gave you the whole idea on what, like I said, the economic status of where these people were. So Alex, decided to say yes to looking after the children while spending time with her young lover, okay, Bob. And she gets there and she's running late, and I really think she was struggling within herself. She wasn't happy where she was or where this relationship was going. So I really think she was struggling, because when Bob asked her later on, what happened, and she said, I just couldn't get going. I really think there was an inner struggle there, whether she wanted to be there with him or whether she didn't. So as she's going through this inner struggle of, whether she should come, she decides to come. She even calls the operating service and says, hey, I've been trying to get in touch with Bob, and, what time is it? What's going on? And, she said, hey, it's this time. And she's like, oh my gosh. So she is like what they call bloody late. She is beyond late. And let me just flip back to a little bit. Dr. Daniel Hirsch, which is played by Peter Finch, is calling Bob as well. So he's getting finished with his doctoring, if you will, and he's calling, and you can tell he's just calling because he wants to hear from him. So between the doctor and the divorcee, you can really tell where everybody's feelings are. The doctor really loves this man, and he makes it very, very open about it. Whereas Alex is having a little bit of trouble showing that part of her. And there's a certain type of, I hate to use this term, but that's what it is, kind of masculinity about her. She's very hard. She's not very feminine, as we have seen in other movies that we have seen during this course, when we saw Marilyn Monroe in Some Like It Hot, very sexy, very kind of right? And when we looked at the movie She's Gotta Have It, once again, very sexy, very erotic. This woman here is not that, and maybe it's because of life, maybe because it's her past hurt from being divorced, maybe it was the way she grew up, maybe, and it gets into that when she's talking to her mother at dinner. But she's very masculine in this, not very sexy or even giving as a nurturer should be. You can even see that when she's taking care of the children. Even when Bob says to her in the bed while they're lying down and before they make love, he goes, I love you. And her comment was, thank you, sir. So you see that harshness on her. She's standoffish, like she wants to be loved and she wants to be in his grasp, in his relationship, because she gets kind of jealous even when he goes out and she knows he's going out to see the doctor. When they spend the night together, he wants to go out and he doesn't really say it, and she kind of goes and says, well, you want to go out. Why can't you just tell me? Are you scared to tell me you want to go out? And he's just like, no, not really. He grabs his things and goes, and and he goes to see the doctor. Meanwhile, she's back at the house with the kids, right? And she's having this moment and she's crying. She's crying while she's eating fudge, and she's trying to read this book and she's trying to get her mind off of it. And I really don't think she's crying about what's in this book. She is crying because she is in this relationship with this man and she wants more. And I frankly don't think she knows how to say what she wants. So she is crying and she goes to pick up the baby and she comes to cuddle the baby and the baby says, I want down. And that's rejection. I don't, I looking at the semiotics and the rhetoric behind it, looking for the sign inside the sign. So here she is, gravitating to this baby because before, the baby was crying, the smaller baby was crying in the middle of the night and she didn't go to them. The oldest daughter did, which was she like 6, 7. Like I said, this film is off the chain. I've never seen anything like it. But I look back at some of the films that we have seen. I have seen things like it, right? And so the oldest child picks up the baby and she kind of goes back to her room. But in this situation, she feels like she wants to be loved, like she wants somebody to love her and appreciate her. So she goes and picks up the little girl and the baby goes, I want down. She goes, you want down? She goes, yeah, I want down. So she puts her down and you can just see this overwhelming emotion come over her, right? And that feel of rejection, not just by this little girl, but by the rejection of what Bob has done. He has left to go see his other lover. And so we go to the doctor, the good doctor. So he comes in, and once again, you can tell where everybody's emotion is, where they have it invested in. The doctor gives him a hug, and you can tell he's so grateful and so glad to see him. And the hug is so intimate. I felt that hug, even through the screen, that I could honestly say, this doctor loves this man. Now, whether Bob had the same feeling, it was hard to kind of read him to see where he really was between these two individuals. I can't say, I don't know. Although he told Alex he loved her in the bed, but her response was something else. So maybe there was a reason why he left. I mean, I know he had, his whole thing that he was going to see the doctor anyway, but maybe that's the reason why he left like he did. I don't know. But he's hard to read. I don't know if he's looking for an opportunity who would help him or he was just a playboy. I can't quite put my finger on him because I feel like he was kind of cold in a certain way. You know what I mean? Like, not like the doctor. The doctor showed his love towards him, his attentiveness towards him, his tenderness towards him. And all of the while hiding the secret among friends and family as he went to a bar mitzvah, the doctor did. And no one knew. They was like, oh, you need a good woman. Let me set you up. And you would get along with this woman and that woman. And I think you would be good. And how come you haven't been married? And how come you haven't been dated? And his simple answer was, I haven't found the right person yet. But he has found the right person. And he just happens to be a young, inspiring artist that's trying to make it. I kind of feel like Bob is one of those type of men that he's just having a good time, and I could be totally wrong about him. I really can be, but it's clear that the good doctor totally is not looking for a one-night stand or a fling. Although he's living in a country and he's in a culture that would be like, no. And Alex, on the other hand, is at arm's length, watching her mother kind of be this wife and this mother that kind of followed all the rules and followed all the boxes until the mother decided to say to her, guess what? I left your father at one time. And the look on her face was like, wait, what? So Alex had this whole thing, this whole thought process all along that her mom was just being, a doormat, or whatever, listening to the phone ring, knowing it was other people calling her dad, and maybe he is having extramarital affairs because, once again, I believe this town was small. And so She said, yeah. She said, your father didn't, your father didn't push, and I was glad for that. And then I realized that I was lonely without him. And so she's like, you need to give it a chance. You need to give it a chance. Telling her daughter this because I felt like she knew her daughter was this hardcore woman. She wasn't trying to be hurt. And even though she said, oh, like, I don't need anybody, I don't need anything, but she did. She wanted love, right? So when you look at the sexual content of this, it was very I was very open, and for this movie to have been out and released in 1971, and to show a woman's body, because you see her body naked, and you see parts of Bob naked from behind, and it wasn't like the movie Shame that I saw. Everything was out in the open. Wow, what a mind blower, right? But this movie tend to give a little bit more discretion, if you will. I just wonder how, and when I think back to some of the movies in the 70s and early 70s, 80s, that they only showed the woman from the waist up. They showed the man from the back. We never saw front. We never saw pubic hair. We never saw those kind of things. And even the love scene between the doctor and Bob, it was very intimate. And once again, you can tell by the doctor's reaction, he is so into this man, and I don't know if he was thinking about coming out to his friends and family. And how would he come out when he's at this bar mitzvah? You can see his mind just turning and looking at the young boy, and it would clip in and clip out to different thoughts and things that were going on. And I'm wondering if he would ever think to himself, could I be as free as this young man, as this young lad, And as we get more into the movie, you start to see a lot of just different scenes, the death of the dog being ran over, and in some sort of way, I guess I can look at it and say death into the relationship. Like I said, the ending does not really get into, because Bob does go to America to present his artistry idea. Does he come back? Who does he come back to? It left it very open-ended, which I think I love the mystery of it. And even when you saw the movie Shampoo, you also saw that open-ended, as the young lady is driving away with the man that I won't say she necessarily wanted, but she certainly had a better future with him than with her young lover, right? And so the playboy. So I kind of got that back and forth, that playboy mentality, right? So when you look at those things like that, you have to ask yourself, like, did he come back? Who did he come back for? Was Alex available? Was she emotionally available? She was certainly physically available, but she wasn't emotionally available, right? Well, the doctor was physically available. He was emotionally available, but was he available outside the walls? It would have been interesting to see the retake of that, to see how they would have played that, how it would look now. I think I saw a movie that they redone it. I'm interested to see, is it the same type of film? Did they go into the romantic drama, or did they take it from the actual real live events that hit? I may get into that and look into that. But when I look at this movie, hindsight, and I thought about the family that allowed them to use their homes, allowed to use their home as their playground, to have their affair while they watch their kids. So opportunists, how did they find out about this person? Who did they know? How did you explain to this family, well, can I bring my friend over? Can I bring, I guess whose idea was it? I wish they had gotten more into that. Although we look at that and we think that's just ridiculous. Nobody would do that, but people do. Even today, people have other people that say, yeah, they were with me when they were out with their girlfriends or out with their lover. We have people that do that. We have, swingers, right? I mean, the couple didn't necessarily indulge, and who's to say they didn't? We don't know that either. Because who was this Professor John? And what was he a professor of? And what did he teach? And what did he do? I mean, what was he? And so we look at so many stereotypes, and it was so funny because the only man of color that was in the film that did not have a speaking part. And he kind of had that, when he introduced Professor John to Alex, she said, oh, Professor John, right? And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. He never said, oh, it's okay. He just kind of tipped his hat and was like, kind of that whole, I hate to use the expression, but kind of like that, that old slave mentality, if you will. Like, oh, it's okay. You know what I mean? When it probably wasn't. Because he was clearly driving them to wherever they were going. And so I just really, I wanted to know. I really wanted to know what was John thinking about when he casted him? What was the hidden message behind that? Even though he was a professor, he still wasn't noted enough to have a speaking part. But anyway, let's get back into this whole love triangle. So they go back and forth, and of course, Bob goes back to Alex where they were staying at, and the lights go out and she gets into this heated debate, right? And he's down, he's like looking at the plug and stuff, and he was like, he's like, man, I wish they would, have American plugs, and and that's when you can really see her, how she feels about him in America. She's like, like, why is everything got to be about America? And and she's just going on, and she's, you can tell when she goes backstairs, and he goes, and he's trying to fix it, and he goes, tell me when it's on, and she goes, okay. So you can truly tell she is like a jealous, I think he even mentioned like a jealous wife, right? And he clicks it off, is it there yet? And she's like, no, she gives him like a little clap back. No, it's not, and yeah, no, and you can see the tension between the two of them. And I really think she wants to love him, but she's afraid. Once again, divorced. What happened to her marriage? What went wrong? Did she have this hard exterior before the marriage went down, or did she get it afterwards? What her sexuality in this movie, like I said, was very masculine. It wasn't feminine at all. And you could see her kind of take charge, because she's like writing, this little thing, and she's like, and he said, what are you writing? Bob said, what are you writing? She said, she said, well, I'm writing I'm leaving my job. And he's like, what? Why would you do that? He says, oh, and he goes, I hope it's not because of me. And she was like, oh, no, not at all. But why would she leave her job? Was her plans to go with him to the United States? What was it? Why did she leave it? How would she live? So once again, that hardcore exterior. And then she goes back to work. And so, of course, let me go back. So then, he's talking about him going to America. He's got this phone call. This phone call comes through, of course, and they want him there right away. So she's feeling some type of way about this now. And she's not quite, don't know what to think. Of course, we already know where the doctor stands. He doesn't want him to go, but he's supportive. Why? Because he truly loves him. So we get to, now she's at work, and she's got a client in front of her, and this guy's been flirting around with her. He lost his job, and so he wants her help. And so she tells him, I would be leaving. And he's like, what? And they have a little small talk, and then he finally says, you know what? You're absolutely beautiful. And she's like, kind of like, the way she goes about it is kind of like, okay, here we go, And he was like, I've always admired you. And he's like buttering it up. And I really think he has feelings for her. I don't think it's just sexual, although it ends up that way, right? So they end up in the bed together. He ends up in the bed while Bob was with Mr. Dr. Daniels, right? Looking at his project and getting things together and all this kind of stuff like that, right? He's at a party at his house, and they're hanging tight. And here's Alex with this other client, right? That's digging her, an older man, right? And they get together and they're like, he spends the night, or actually not even the night, but just, they're just getting into it, and they're just kind of laying in bed together. And meanwhile, Bob just cannot stand the people that is at the doctor's party. So I believe he made an excuse to leave. He said it wasn't his cup of tea. He didn't like the drama. So he was leaving. The doctor was just like, well, leave, And then the doctor, of course, came back to the house, and he was like, everybody fuck off. Everybody get out. You know what? Like, leave, right? So meanwhile, Bob tries to call Alex. Of course, she doesn't pick up the phone, whatever else it is. So the answering server, which is Betsy Love, calls her, and she goes, yeah, basically like, saying, oh, I know I missed a call. Who was it from? This, that, and the other. Because, Alex calls the answering service, which I think is cool, right? But man, have times changed, right? And she goes, oh, yes, Mr. Bob Elkin was calling you because he wanted to know, were you at home? Because he's on his way there. And she's like, oh, shit. Here she is in the bed with another lover. And they have no time to, like, get out of there, right? So they just play it off. So when Bob comes in, he's like, oh, she doesn't even seem to be rattled. He's like, oh, darling, will you come down? And he comes down or whatever like that. And Bob's like, okay. So he leaves. And it's so funny. Bob says, so who was that? Once again, I do think he cares for her. But I don't think he knows what he truly wants. And I think Alex at that point actually don't know what she wants either. I think out of all of these people, the three of them, at the end of the day, I think Peter, Dr. Daniel Hirsch, is the only one that knows what he truly wants. He wants to be happy. He wants to be free. He wants to be in love with his lover. At the end, he said something. He goes, if someone asks me if I'm happy, I'm definitely happy. I'm happy with him, except for the course of him not being here. And he said, I would rather have him basically in my life than to have nothing at all. That says a lot about the doctor, because he comes to his truth, and he recognizes that he might not be able to have what he considers the perfect relationship. To be free, to share his sexuality, his love, not only his love for what he does, but his love for another man. And he has settled with just taking it as it presents himself. I think we do a lot of that too. I think we love and we just take the love as it comes. And some people just take the love no matter how it comes, whether it's a negative reaction or a positive reaction. I heard someone say that, you know, when we look at the world of social media and just media, period, you know, it's better to get um, negative publicity than no publicity at all. That's sad that we would rather be negative to do something to get nothing at all. So at the end of the day, I don't even know if Alex was truly fulfilled. She was definitely missing something, and she did not want to say what it was. And to have this movie to be put in a position where it openly talks about bisexual and bisexual relationships and being gay and being in the threesome, because that's what it is, in a love triangle. And I know threesome is like, oh, you know, we're all, no, this was definitely a threesome. It was just individualized. And to have been released in 1971, which I'm pretty sure people were like, oh, same way with Midnight Cowboy. Everybody was just, the people that were talked about it and the sources that talked about this movie, that this was just a groundbreaking movie, right? I'm pretty sure at the end of the day, I would hope that it gave open conversation. As right now we have, you know, Black Lives Matter, hashtag Me Too, LGBTQ, all of these movies that are coming out showing that it's okay to be different. When we have culture and inclusion, which people think inclusion is somebody coming out of the closet, when inclusion is everything. It's me being a woman of color. It's my husband that served in the war and he has PTSD. It's a person who's going down the street with a cane or a crutch or a wheelchair, and we have a right to be human and be treated as humans. We use words so interchangeably and we don't even know what they mean. And so we throw these daggers and throw rocks and hide our hands and not have a real conversation about sex and diversity and color and race and discrimination. And we clearly know that this man, that this doctor, no matter how good he was, that if they found out, if they scooped out that he was a bisexual man, his practice would be over. He would no longer be rich. They would strip him down and everything. Look what they did as a divorced woman. Look how they put her. To be a divorced woman or a woman that has never been married at all, you were like, that was the worst thing that could happen to you. Look how they had her home. Look how they had her house. So here we are with the discrimination and the stereotypes of what a divorced woman is, right? This movie clarified all of that. And as the man of color, even though he was a professor, but not having his own voice, we saw it all right in this movie. Sunday Bloody Sunday. It was genius, the way John Schneider put it all together. You got to go take a look at it. A Jewish, bisexual, gay man who lives in London in a love triangle with a divorcee woman. It was a powerful movie. It could even be political, as they looked at different clips of papers of economic crisis going on. Aren't we not in that? Isn't that what we're going through right now? LGBTQ, economic crisis with gas, everything that's up on the rise, right? People in these love triangles, people being busted on TV, Good Morning America, you know, people with Nina Long, you know, and her husband and her love. Are we, and it doesn't have to be in London. We're right here in America and things are happening all over the place. So when I look at this movie, we're living it right now. I want to thank you for allowing me to share my video essay. My 6 sources will be at the end of this, and it will also be in a Word document. I hope you have enjoyed my take on this, and I want to thank you, Professor, for allowing me to be able to do this. This was fun and I enjoyed it and I learned a lot. This is Sex and Cinema. I am Dawn Sanchez and this was my take on Sunday Bloody Sunday.